I was born in a house on Long Lake, and
is that a street name or a lake?
that's the name of a lake. There's a couple long lakes in Kalamazoo County, but anyway, I only lived there for 6 or 8 months, and then we moved to Plainwell, Michigan, where we lived for a couple years, and that's the first place I remember. And the only memory I have of that house is that my dad bought his first TV there, and it was, so this would have been in like 1951 or 2. And the TVs, the first ones had a screen like this. It was round, and it was like this big. And so he had it down in the basement, and he could get a couple of stations tuned in, and the only show I remember watching on that was a show called Kukla, Fran, and Ollie, and it was a puppet show anyway. And so that's all I remember about that house. We moved into Kalamazoo on a street called Remine Street, Remine, and it was just off of Burdick. And I started school there. And I would walk to school. It was about probably a half a mile to school. I would walk, and it was...
Would you walk by yourself, or did you have siblings you walked with?
No, I was the first one born, so I walked by myself. Those were different days back then. They didn't worry about child abduction or anything. And so I went to kindergarten, first grade, and half of second grade there. It was called McKinley School. And then we moved to Milwood in Kalamazoo, and we were there for a couple years. I went to the second half of second grade and third there. Then we moved to Portage, where I spent most of my childhood from age 9 on through when I graduated from high school. And in Portage, we lived on Velvet Street, which was just around the corner from where...
Sounds familiar.
Where you lived on the Westnedge.
On Westnedge.
Yeah, the first street south of where we lived on Westnedge was Velvet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And
so then when your mom moved and lived on Calico, she was actually living pretty close.
She was the next street south of that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I had a friend named Wayne Miller who I met basically my first day in school in 4th grade there, and we were friends all through elementary, what we called junior high, and high school, and then he moved down to Texas later on, and so I had 2 sisters, Marcia and Sally, and that's about it.
How far apart were you and your siblings?
Marcia was 3 years younger than me, and Sally was then 2 years younger than Marcia.
So did you guys play much together with them
Yeah.
being girls and so much younger?
Yeah, we did. We would play board games and stuff, and yeah, we got along pretty well together. Yeah.
Okay, so you talked about your best friend, would you call Wayne?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then were there any like family friends that, were a big part of your life? Maybe more for your friends of your parents more so than friends of you?
My parents were pretty good friends with. My dad came from a big family. He had 11 brothers and sisters, and so we would visit his sister Nita and their family quite often, and we would occasionally visit his brother Cooley and their family, and his brother Jake, his oldest brother, would invite us out to Jake's cottage from time to time, and on a lake, and he would invite the whole Hoogendoorn clan out there, and we'd have a kind of a reunion out there. And my mother, we would visit my grandmother's house pretty much every Sunday, and spend the entire Sunday there. We'd have dinner there, and us kids would watch TV or whatever, while the parents would be chatting in the sunroom until bedtime, and then they'd drive us home.
Did you guys go to church on Sunday or just do that on Sunday?
From time to time, we visited my grandmother's church, United Methodist in Parchment, when I was small, quite a bit. After I was old enough to understand that kind of thing, my parents, we tried 2 different churches in Portage for, maybe 3 or 4 months, and that was about it. My parents weren't very keen on religion.
Do you remember which those 2 churches were or anything?
I know where they were. I don't know what their names were. One was just south of the high school, like a quarter mile south on Westnedge there, and the other one was on Osterhout or Bacon Road. I can't remember the 2 roads that come off of Westnedge way down towards the end of Westnedge.
And you said that you were born in a house on a lake.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know why you only lived there for a few months, or?
I think probably, from what I gathered, it was somebody in the family's, I think one of my dad's relatives' house that they weren't using, and my parents didn't have much money, so I don't know if they rented it from them or if they just let them live there for a few months while they were getting on their feet till they had enough money to rent their own place in Plainwell.
Okay. And do you know, like, how soon before you were born your parents got married?
Probably about a year before I was born, they were married, yeah.
And do you know what age they were around when you were born?
Yeah, my dad was 21, and I think my mom was 19.
Hmm. And do you know what your dad was doing for work?
Yeah, I think, I think he was at the time. He had previously worked in the state hospital, the mental hospital, for a little while.
Doing what? Do you know?
Just as an orderly. I think that's what they called him. Just uh, but by the time I recall anything about him working, he was working for the company he worked for the rest of his life, called Dunkley Company, where they would make various big machines, but their main machine was a cherry pitter, and they sold a lot of those to orchards up in northern Michigan, and so that was kind of an important part of our life. Is probably, I'm going to say, at least 5 summers we spent the entire summer where he was working, servicing cherry pitters, because they would break down quite often. And so he would get located somewhere up in northern Michigan. Hart, there was a little city called Hart, Hart. We spent 2 summers there, and then Traverse City we spent, I believe, 2 summers, and we spent 1 summer up in the Upper Peninsula, and we spent 1 summer in upstate New York, by kind of near Rochester, right on the right on the coast of Lake Ontario. And so that was fun. Yeah.
Would you look forward to those summers?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun for us kids. Yeah.
And did the company, what kind of housing how did that work?
They would just have my dad and mom find a place to rent, and then they would pay for it. The company would pay for it. And I guess probably all of our expenses. Yeah.
That sounds nice. Before you started going to school, do you remember what some of your favorite things were to do, maybe for fun?
Before I went to school?
Preschool age, so like age 3, 4, maybe.
Oh, just kind of, at that age I was on Remind Street there, and I knew a few of the people, a few of the kids on the street, and so just basically, there was, at the end of the street you could go into the woods, and it actually, if you went through the woods, it would connect with Crane Park. Anyway, so we would go up there sometimes, and otherwise we would just like play in friends' houses and play games, board games or whatever.
So were you more of an indoor player or an outdoor, or both?
I think I was about half and half. Yeah, yeah. I remember at that age I was really, Disney was just getting started, and I was really into everything to do with Walt Disney stuff. And when I was probably 5, is when the Mickey Mouse Club show first started, and that was like big cultural influence in my life at the time. Davy Crockett was a character in a film that Disney made at that time, and they'd also show that on Mickey Mouse Club, and you know, they'd sell Davy Crockett stuff in the store and stuff like that. So I remember Davy Crockett was a big deal in my life at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that's about it.
Were you watching that on your dad's little TV in the basement?
No, we had gotten a regular TV by then. Yeah, so.
And was your TV just as good as like your friend's TV, or did you have like a friend where you liked to go watch it on theirs better?
I don't recall watching TV at anybody's house at that age, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would you guys watch it together as a family, or was it just something you were interested in?
It was just something I was interested in, and my mom was really into soap operas, and like As the World Turns, The Edge of Night, I Search for Tomorrow. I remember all the names because they were always on, you know, all day long.
So she's always been a leave the TV on type of person, because I know she does, at least when I lived with her.
Yeah.
TV was always on.
Right.
It was HGTV at that point, but.
Oh.
So, but she did that even when she was young. She would just leave it on.
Yeah. And she'd watch it too. I suppose while she was doing other stuff, but yeah. And I'd try to watch it, but you know, I couldn't follow the stories. You know, why I couldn't figure out why everybody was so, you know, in the plots, why they were so concerned about so and so doing that or that. It's funny.
What about education? Was that something that you felt like your parents would focus on, that you got good grades, you did your homework, all that?
Yeah, they were. Of course, elementary back then wasn't as academically oriented as it is today, but I'm just kind of deducing that they were interested in it back then, because later on they were very interested in how I was doing academically and supported me and stuff. I was going to say something about that. Go ahead.
Did your dad ever say anything to you, for example, like, I want you to, you know, be able to have a better career than me, or did he ever say anything like?
No, but
did he ever give you any counsel, you know, like?
No, but I could tell that they were, just by, I don't know how actually, but I could tell that they felt it was important that I stay in school and do as best as I could. And I think they probably knew that, you know, I had potential and stuff. And so, I do remember one interesting, they made sure that, I always had access to books. My mom would take me to the library quite often when I was young, and I remember the first book I read, the first, what you guys called chapter book, was when I was 6. I had just learned to read in school, and I've, you know, started out, of course, reading the Dick and Jane books, and then, so anyways, somehow I got a hold of this chapter book, which I'm guessing my mom might have put into my possession, and man, that just blew my mind. You know, story. Wow, you can read a book and this whole long story, you know. I was hooked on reading from that point. Yeah.
And as you got into high school, would you say you were a good student? Did you hate school?
I was a good student. That's another thing where I could tell by my parents, mostly my mother, that she felt that education was important, because pretty much every year they'd have an honor what do they call it?
Honor roll?
And there was a program where they would hand out, you know, little plaques, you know, for people that got honors, were in the honors category. I don't know what they called it, but anyway, she would always go with me because I got every year but one, I got an honor award for my grades, and so she would always go with me. And yeah.
And then back then, was it expected, or like most kids, when they graduated from high school, they would go straight on to college, or was that was it different back then?
Yeah, if you were someone who they could tell you were interested in school type stuff, yeah, it was pretty much assumed you would go to college. Yeah.
Did you go to college after high school?
Yeah, I went. Yeah.
What college did you go to?
Western Michigan University.
And what about medical history? Was there anything in your life or in your family's life remarkable as far as medical history during your growing up years?
Yeah, two things happened to me. I had a ear infection when I was like 5 or 6, and it apparently after it healed, it left scar tissue inside my ear, and it was affecting my hearing. So I had to go in for surgery for that.
Did you get like tubes in, or do you know what?
No,
happened?
they didn't have to put tubes in. I guess, from what I was told, that they just removed the scar tissue, and that took care of it. But I remember, the only thing I remember about it is when they were, back then, they would anesthetize you by putting a mask over your face with ether coming in. You know, you could smell the ether is really strong alcohol type smell. And I remember when I don't know if it was when I was going out or while I was out, I would hear voices, you know, I guess the doctors and nurses, and they would be real echoey, and like in a science fiction movie, you know. And I remember because like for days afterwards, I'd think back on how weird that was, you know. Anyway, so there was that, and then I had to have my tonsils removed. Yeah.
Do you remember how old you were when you got your tonsils out?
Tonsils was pretty early, like when I was 4, I think.
Oh.
Yeah. Then my dad had to have his tonsils out a couple years later, I remember. Yeah.
So, but basically, growing up, your parents seemed pretty healthy.
Yeah, I don't think either one of them. Oh, my dad had a few years where he was really troubled by ulcers, and he had to take antacids and stuff, and yeah, but
do you remember like roughly how old you are when he was going through that?
I'd say when I was like 8 or so. Yeah.
Okay, so you already kind of talked about what the fads were then as far as Disney goes. Were there any other fads that were notable from your childhood that might seem interesting from today's perspective?
From those early years, no. I can't remember anything else.
Okay. Do you have any like funny experiences that you just remember from when you were a kid that is a story you want to be chronicled?
A couple. One is that just memories that when I was riding in the back of the car one day, I had a milkshake they had gotten me, and we were heading down the road, and I drank half of it, didn't want the rest of it, and tossed it out the window.
Was that normal back then?
Yeah, it was fairly normal. Yeah, back in, I'd say, late 50s, the whole nation had a big campaign to clean up litter. Don't be a litter bug was their phrase they'd use, and they'd have public announcements on TV, little commercials where, don't throw your trash along the highway and stuff. And so, yeah, it made a big difference, because before that, it was just perfectly socially acceptable to toss anything out your window as you drove along. Anyway, so I did that. Unfortunately, the winds, I don't know how that happened because I was in the back, but maybe I threw it forward, probably, as I threw it out. And my dad's window was open, so it was an open container, and so he got the milkshake all over him,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he wasn't too happy about that. Another thing, I remember down the road there was a teenage girl that would babysit, and her brother was a friend of mine, her younger brother, and anyway, so she would babysit just a few times, and I just loved, because she would pay attention to me, play games with me and stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my mom one night, so when are you guys going out again? So I could have Gladys babysit me. My mom wasn't too happy about that.
Oh. What about, should we record the Sally fell out story?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was when I was about 10 or 11, and Sally would have been about, I might have only been 9, I guess. Sally was like 3, and we were heading down the road. We just left home. We went around the corner. My mom wasn't going that fast, maybe 10 to 15 miles an hour, and us 3 kids were in the back seat, and we happened to notice the door just swung open, the back door, and we looked over, and Sally, my sister, had just fallen out of the car. And we just said, "Mom, Sally fell out." And she hit the brakes and backed up, and yeah, she was fine though.
Okay, let's see. Talk a little bit about your social life when you were a teenager.
Oh, let's see. So I hung out with Wayne Miller all the time. let's see, we didn't really have much of a social life until we got girlfriends later on.
Do you remember how old you were when you got your first girlfriend?
I was 15. I was just going, it was a summer between 10th and 11th grade.
You're probably 16. Well, but your birthday's in August.
Or so 11th and 12th grade, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you would have been 16.
Yeah. Yeah, I just turned 16, yeah. That's what it was. Right. And, yeah.
Do you want to tell a little bit about, how did you meet your first girlfriend?
I met her double dating. We went to a drive-in theater and
with Wayne and another girl
and his girlfriend, and they had set me up with this girl named Pam Watts.
Did you have your own car?
No. I'm thinking Wayne Miller had borrowed his brother's car. He had an older brother, yeah.
So when did you get your first car?
I got my first car. I had just graduated from high school, and I had gotten my first real job as a busboy at Howard Johnson's by the airport there. And
was that a restaurant back then instead of a hotel, or both?
Wow, I can't remember. Seems like it was just, I only remember a restaurant, but yeah, so I was working one day and went out. Can't remember the details of how this happened, but my parents let me know that there was a ride or something out back. Come on out back. There's somebody who can pick you up or whatever. I went out and they had bought my Aunt Gloria's car, and it was parked out there. Oh yeah, 1956 Chevy Bel Air.
Talked about how you would travel for the summers. Did you guys go on any other notable trips when you were growing up?
Yeah, I felt that was an important part of my childhood, that my parents seem to think that family vacations were a high priority, because we went down well, even before I can remember, we have pictures of it where the whole family with Grandma and Grandpa Beatty also along with us would go down south, like Mammoth Caves or whatever it was, or Luray Caverns, I'm not sure which it was, where you go in and there's the stalactites and that kind of stuff. And we went out to one summer to spend a week or so with our dad's brother Jack and their family in Denver area, and also traveled around out west a little on that trip. Seems like we were out traveling every summer. I guess mostly for my dad's job, but yeah.
Did you ever ride on an airplane when you were still at home?
No, my first plane ride was when I interviewed for my first job in Indianapolis. That was my first plane ride that I think I ever had. Yeah.
And did you ever go out of the country when you were growing up?
We went up to Canada a couple of times. Back then in Michigan, it might probably still that way. You couldn't buy firecrackers. Firecrackers were really big with my age kids, and so you'd have to drive up to Canada to get them, and so we did that a couple of times. Not just for that, but like we went up to Niagara Falls. I remember one year that was really quite a memorable sight to see the Niagara Falls, and of course I brought back a good load of firecrackers with me.
So if you could just describe like your family dynamic growing up.
Oh, pretty much. If you were to concoct the most typical 1960s American family, that would be us. Middle class, mom and dad and 3 kids, and lived in a suburban neighborhood, and really no crime involved with our lives, around us, and it was pretty idyllic, I guess you would call it.
And as far as parenting, did your parents have different parenting styles, and maybe describe that a little bit?
See, one thing I remember is that Mom would, and I'm pretty sure this was Mom's idea, that she would make sure that my dad would do things with me, like, play catch in the front yard, and I think some of this was my dad's idea too, and later when I was 15, I think it was, side note, when I was, I don't remember what age, but 13, let's say, when I was 13, my neighbor across the street, who was, he was he would go up north hunting. That was the big thing in Michigan, is deer hunting season. A lot of the guys would go drive way up north, hours and hours to get up north to hunt deer. Anyway, he was one of those guys, and anyway, he had this box of different types of bullets, shells, every caliber you could name. Probably he even had like a 50 caliber, machine gun round in there. It was pretty cool because you could just take the bullet part of it out and look at it and put it back in. Anyway, he must have had, I'd say, close to 100 different shells in there, and that got me interested in guns, and plus he had like American Rifleman magazines bound in big, volumes, like a couple years worth, and he gave me those, and I would go through those over and over again for years, and I had a BB gun, and so I'd like to go, always used to like to go out in the woods and just shoot at trees and stuff, but I always wanted a real gun, a 22 rifle. So my dad, like at a young age, told me, so when you get 15, we'll buy you a gun. And he did, and so we'd go out and shoot and stuff at the target range.
But you never went hunting?
Never. Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. So that's another thing my dad and I did. We'd go out hunting, which was kind of a miserable experience because it was in the winter always, and we never, ever found anything to shoot at except one time. There was a rabbit. We were walking along, and somehow my dad happened to spot a rabbit in a thicket, a big thicket of stuff, and so he crept up on it, and he was like, 10 feet away with a shotgun and blasted it.
Oh gosh.
And it was really a gruesome sight. And so from then on, I wasn't really interested in hunting. That's not for me, But anyway, I'm still interested in guns, and we like to go out to the target range and shoot. And he would take me out fishing quite often too. His sister's husband, they lived on a lake, and they had a boat that they would let us use whenever we wanted to, and we'd go out on the lake and fish. But he tried to do stuff with me, during my childhood. And Mom, she was always really into keeping me well dressed. She would knit sweaters. She used to knit sweaters, and she used to work at Sears and Roebuck, and so she knew what all the clothing was available, and she'd get discounts on clothing, and so I always had. Oh, and she would iron my pants. It was always important that your pants were well pressed and stuff. And when the Beatles came out in '63, I think it was, they set a trend for what they called pegged pants. Have you heard that term? Where they're like stovepipe, tight pants.
Oh, kind of like skinny jeans?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so she would peg my pants for me, take them in so that they were real tight.
Oh, she'd have to tailor them or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh.
And one pair I had, they were sort of the foothold to get them through. I'd have to work at it for, like 30 seconds before I could get the foot through. Anyway, but I loved them. That was, the ultimate, to wear peg pants like that. And yeah, so she kept me well dressed, and yeah.
Oh, do you remember what age you were when she started working at Sears?
Yeah, I'd say she started pretty early on, maybe when I was like 8 or so, and she'd work for a couple years and then take a couple years off and then work a couple more like that. I remember we used to only have one car, and we'd have to go down and pick her up, sit there outside of Sears for 10, 15 minutes waiting for her to come out. And yeah.
So, she would do that. The hours were, I don't know if you remember.
She seemed like she'd work a lot in the evening. I think it was probably always in the evening. She'd probably work till 9 o'clock when the store closed.
And this is a question I forgot to ask earlier when we were talking about reading. Do you remember doing story time at bedtime or anything about that?
No. They never did that, no.
Do you even remember what bedtime was like when you were young enough that they had to put you to bed?
No, I don't. That's funny. Because my sisters had their own bedroom from age 9 from my age, 9 and up, they had their own bedroom.
So before that, you guys shared a room?
Must be, no. No, I think I always had my own room. Yeah, whatever house we were in. So, yeah, I don't remember anything about bedtimes.
And a lot of times, like, one parent will be the, enforcer, and the other one will just be nice. Was that a dynamic between your parents, or no?
Yeah, I think Mom was always the enforcer, yeah, right.
And did you feel like when it came to, like, how did they regularly tell you that they loved you?
No, never.
Never, ever?
Never, ever. No.
What about hugs?
No.
No?
Never, ever.
What about, like, praise?
Praise? No. I don't recall ever.
What about, like, gifts?
Maybe
the clothes was kind of a gifty thing? Or?
Well, Christmases were, like, over the top. I mean, even me as a kid who, kids don't really appreciate what's being done for them, but even as a kid, I could tell, wow, all these Christmas gifts was, yeah, they really went out overboard at Christmas time, yeah.
Okay. And then you talked about how you and your dad would spend time together. What about you and your mom? You said she didn't really play with you, and she was more about maybe getting stuff ready for you, but you didn't really have, like, any special things you would do?
No.
Okay. Do you have any memories of, like, a time that your parents got, other than the milkshake, a time that your parents got really mad at you, or, like, what about discipline in the parenting?
They were pretty, I mean, I would call them not a strict disciplinarian type parenting. There were a handful of times when, back then, spanking on the butt was pretty normal. So there was a handful of those times.
Did they use belts, or was it usually their hand?
No, just their hand, yeah. And when I got older, they would send me to my room if I, got out of hand. But that was really rare, too. Yeah, so I don't really remember much discipline.
Did they have any rules that you can remember? Like house rules, or just, like, things that they were strict? I know you said they weren't strict, but was there anything they were strict about? Maybe curfews or cleanliness?
Well, they were, they had a rigid bedtime, a timing requirement. Like, I remember it went by age, when you get 10, you can stay up till, like, at 8 o'clock instead of 7 or whatever. It wasn't that early, but, and when you get to be 12, you can stay up till 9, and that was really rigid. So, yeah, you'd have to go up to your room and, at least pretend to go to bed at the right time.
And then about, like, keeping house, how was your mom? Was she really liked to be very clean? She was like, it's fine, or she was messy?
I think
hoarder?
She was quite clean, yeah. I don't remember any messes anywhere.
Do you remember if she would?
Except in my room. My room was a disaster, and it was one of those situations where she'd let it go for months, until she couldn't stand it anymore, and she'd clean it up, and then it was right back a week later.
Did you have any chores?
Yeah, I had to feed the dog, and mow the lawn. Yeah, and there were a couple of periods where they tried to get my sisters and I to take turns washing dishes. You know, there's no dishwashers back then. But we complained so much that they just dropped that. Yeah. And that's about all that was required of us.
Then, before we move on to the adult years, is there anything else about your childhood that you would want to be recorded?
It was a great childhood. And my parents made sure that I learned a lot and took me places and were very, very kind. And they took us to a lot of family gatherings, both on my mother's family side and on my dad's family side. And so it was a great childhood.
Awesome. Okay, so let's start by talking about I know you didn't serve in the military, but I think you had an experience with the military, if you're comfortable having it recorded.
Yeah, that's ancient history, so. Yeah, well, the Vietnam War hit when I was at the age when I would ordinarily have been drafted.
And were you in college?
I was in college. The way that the system they had was that if you were in college at the time, that they would not draft you. They'd give you a special classification, student, whatever classification. But then when you graduated, then you were, able to be drafted. So I was in school, I was in college, but then my first try at college was not successful because that was the years where the hippie revolution happened, 67-ish, that whole period. And I was caught up in that. So I dropped out of college and got drafted.
So had you originally been able to submit your student exemption?
Mm-hmm.
But then, do they just check it every year, or?
Yeah, must be.
Okay.
Yeah, must be. So I actually got drafted, got sent to Detroit with a busload of other guys to be inducted. And at the induction, I had found out how you could make your blood pressure artificially elevated. So anyway, long story short, I did that. They sent me back home that same day, and then so my dad had dropped me off in Kalamazoo at the place where they all gathered to get on the bus to go off to Detroit. So he drops me off in the morning and thinking, okay, my son's going off,
to war.
Yeah, off to war. And so I get back in town that same day and hook up with my friends, and there just happened to be an anti-war protest that night at the college. A big protest. They had to bring in the police with tear gas and the whole 9 yards, and they rounded up 100 students or young people that were protesting, one of which was me, and took them to jail. And so my dad, after having dropped me off to go off to war in the morning, that same night was called can you come down and get your son, you know, bail him out of jail? And so they were not happy about that. My parents were not happy about that at all. Anyway. Yeah.
Were you living with them?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And did your dad serve in the military?
He did.
He was a cook.
Yeah.
In the Navy?
He was a cook in the Navy, and he was stationed on Guam, the island of Guam. Yeah. He joined up right after the war ended, like within months after the war ended. World War II ended.
Okay, and I think he was 17. He lied about his age, right?
Right.
So did he ever share, I know he was unhappy about picking you up in jail, but did he ever share if he was unhappy about you not going to serve in the war?
No, he never talked about stuff like that, you know, like
opinions,
political things, or the most political thing that he ever that he seemed to be really into and paying attention to is when Kennedy was assassinated. He really I'm not sure why that so affects me.
The only time you saw him really like work up about something.
Yeah. Yeah, he was really upset about that. And
did he cry about it?
No. But actually the only way, well, two things. One thing is that it's a short while after the assassination, they came out with this commemorative book about Kennedy, and I remember he ordered that. And then the other thing is when it was, if you recall, a couple of days after Kennedy was assassinated, they had arrested Oswald, his assassin, and
he got killed too,
he
right?
got killed. And my dad and I were going up to the grocery store to get something, and I remember it came on the radio that Oswald was assassinated. And I remember my dad saying, well, I'm glad he got killed. I could tell he was, you know, debating how he should feel about that. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I'm kind of glad he got killed.
And that was, what year was that happened?
64, I think. Yeah.
So that was before you went to be drafted, right?
Yeah. I was drafted in probably 68, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, okay, so we talked about college, and you said did you do like one semester or 1 year?
I think I did. So when I first went to college, I had done so well in high school that they put me in what they called honors college, and they had special classes for the honors people, and they were really good classes too, and I studied pretty diligently and stuff, but just my extracurricular life was just too invasive. It wasn't allowing me to do what I needed to do. So I think I finished the first semester and then dropped out.
And did you get involved in the hippie revolution in high school or in college?
In I would say in the summer between high school and college, yeah.
Okay.
When I started getting into that.
And then you went back to college later in life? Can we talk about that?
So first semester I did and dropped out probably middle of the second semester. Then I tried going to the local community college, and I did a couple classes there. And I remember I came back to the university and did a couple classes, and it wasn't till I came back from my mission that I got serious and said, okay, I got to finish this. So I had gotten altogether maybe close to 2 years worth of credits by then, so I just buckled down and finished the last 2 years after I got back from my mission.
Okay. And so do you remember how old you were when you graduated college?
I was, so it was 83, so I was 34, almost 34, yeah.
So you lost like a decade of your life to the
Right.
hippie revolution.
The lost decade, yeah. Yeah. It was it was about 7 years from age 18 or 17, 17 till 25. 25 is when I joined the church and got my life back. Mm-hmm.
Got it. And then what was your degree that you graduated with?
Computer systems engineering, bachelor's degree.
And then talk about your career.
So my career was software engineer, starting in Indianapolis for 3 years. Then we went to Cedar Rapids from there.
Sounds right. Yeah, we probably don't have to detail every job because how many jobs would you say you've had technically?
Probably 20, around 20 different jobs, yeah.
And were any of them different than being a software engineer, or were any of them especially notable?
No, they were all pretty much the same, yeah.
And what's something that you really like about the career you chose?
Flexibility, being treated, with respect in the workplace, and also getting to learn new stuff all the time, and working with good people. They're all engineers. Are all good people. So, can you pause?
Yeah. And is there anything about your career that you disliked? You wish?
Sometimes, well, yeah. It's the nature of engineering projects that they always run past the deadline, and so there's always a big crunch at the end where you have to work overtime, and you're never sure whether you're gonna, finish it in a reasonable length of time, and that whole pressure that's put on you. That's the only part I really didn't like.
And then we're going to talk about marriage and family. So, maybe talk about how you met your wife and when you got married. Start there.
So I had served a mission in Germany, and when I came home in end of 1979, I met Cassie in church. She had arranged to meet me. She had engineered a pretext to meet me at church as I was waiting in the foyer to go into meetings, and so I invited her. I was living with my grandmother at the time, and so I invited her to come home for dinner that day, and after dinner we went out for a walk, and that was it. I was hooked.
Did you guys take a picture that day?
Maybe. You have to ask her that. She would know better than I.
Okay. And how long did you date before you proposed? And then maybe to talk about the proposal.
Yeah, okay. So we dated about 2 months. See, I met her on February 17th, I think. February 17th is a notable date. I can't remember whether it's when we met or when we got engaged. I think that's when we got engaged. So we had only known each other probably, I would say less than 2 months when we got engaged, and then 4 months, 3.5 months later we were married.
And how did you propose?
We would meet at her house. Well, she lived with her mother at the time. We would meet at her mother's house, and we would have family home evenings on Monday nights together, just her and I. And so one Monday I said that I would do the lesson, and she asked me, okay, as we started, she said, is there anything you need for the lesson? I said, no, I've got everything set here. And when we came to the lesson, I proposed to her as the family home evening lesson, and she said yes.
And then you said you got married. What was the date you got married?
July 12th.
1983.
No, 1980.
1980.
83 is when we left Kalamazoo.
And then where did you get married?
We were married in the Washington, D.C. temple. We had driven down the night before. We had taken an older brother back up. I had a good friend. After I joined the church and had moved to Kalamazoo, my best friend in the church was Dave Johnson, he was a software engineer for Upjohn Company, and he also taught on the side at the college, at the university. Anyway, he's the guy that got me into computers. Where was I going with this?
About maybe he came with you, or you brought him?
He was my
escort,
yeah, for the marriage in the temple.
Did you guys get your endowment? No, you were already endowed.
And Mom did too. She had her endowments.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you know when she got hers?
Yeah, she got hers, strangely enough, her endowment on the same day. pause it? I'm going to go ask her.
Well, I'll ask her during her interview
All right.
about that.
Yeah. Was the day, I think, the day, I don't know.
But it was when you knew her that she got endowed?
I can't remember.
Okay.
Can't remember. We'll have to have her tell you that.
Okay. And did your parents come to your wedding in Washington, D.C.?
No. No, they didn't.
Was there an invitation, or just you didn't invite them, or how did that go?
Well, because they wouldn't have been able to attend the wedding ceremony, it seemed kind of, I can't even remember whether I invited them or not. They were divorced by then.
Oh, okay.
So, and...
Did the divorce happen after you had moved out?
Actually, it happened, after I graduated and things got all crazy, I would move out, for a few months and just couldn't make it anymore on my own. And so I'd ask my parents if I could come back and stay, and so I'd stay for a short time till I got back on my feet and go back out on my own, that kind of a thing. Anyway, so it was one of the periods when I was back with my dad. They had moved out of the house that I had grown up in and bought a new house, or had a new house built out in Vicksburg, out in kind of in the country. And so I was staying with him.
So they built a house out there after you finished high school?
Yeah.
And they did it together?
They did it together, and they were there, I don't know, not that long, maybe a year. And I remember I lived with them. I actually lived with them for maybe 6 months, and then I remember when things got bad and Mom moved out, and so I'd say.
So he stayed in the newly built house.
He stayed in the house.
And she moved where? Like to her own place she was paying for, or did she move into someone else's house?
I don't really recall where she went.
Okay.
Yeah, I would assume she rented a house, but I'm not sure. I think she rented an apartment at that time in Cherry Hill Apartments on gosh, I can't remember the name of the road, but out on the east side. Yeah.
Okay. And then family. So I'm trying to think of how you describe your family, but just start with, maybe I was going to say the names and birthdays of your children, but I don't know if that's a good idea.
So what was the question again?
So now we're supposed to talk about family.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to think of how to go about it, and I'm thinking, I was going to say like the names and birth dates of your children, but that's a lot. Yeah. I don't know if you know all of that.
That'd be too taxing on my brain.
Yeah. So
yeah, we started out having Carissa like a year after we were married. And then we had Summer, and then we moved to Indianapolis, and we had Marie.
So you were still in college for your first two children?
Yes. Right. See, you were born...
82.
82, yeah, and I didn't graduate till summer of 83.
Okay.
Yeah. Marie was born, and Johnny in Indianapolis. Then we moved to Cedar Rapids, and Melody and Duane, right? Were born there. Then we moved to Florida. And
we did live in Wisconsin. Was no one born there? Probably not.
No.
Okay.
Yes. So there was two in Kalamazoo, 2 in Indianapolis, 2 in Cedar Rapids. That's how I remember. And then 4 in Florida.
Everyone else in Florida. Got it.
Abe, Duane, Abe, Daniel, Paige, and Angel were born in Florida. They were all born with a midwife delivering them. And the rest were born in hospitals.
And as an adult, do you have any notable medical events?
Just my appendicitis, appendectomy that I had a couple years ago, when we, which was an interesting.
Yeah, it's a good story. Let's tell that.
We had gone down to Atlanta. The Troyers went with us, and we were going to the temple. We were going to go to the temple and do sealings where we would have, I can't remember whether it was, it was a sealing of a close family. It was either mom and dad that were being sealed. I think it might have been. Anyway, so we were in the temple, and I hadn't felt well all day. We got into the temple, and it was continuing to feel worse and worse. And we finished the sealings, and the rest of the family, I didn't feel good enough to do anything else. The family went off to a museum, a children's museum. Cassie and the Troyers went off there, and I went to the hotel room to lay down. And as I was laying there, I just felt something, a sudden change in my condition. The pain just suddenly got, fairly serious. So I didn't have my cell phone with me.
Why? You left it in the car or something?
Gosh, I can't remember. All I remember is I was trying to use the hotel phone to call Cassie, and they said, no, we can't make
outgoing calls?
Something like that. It wasn't working for some reason. So I just had to wait till you would think that I would have been able to text them or something. I think maybe
you didn't
Mom
have your phone.
had not taken her phone with her. But then I could have texted the Troyers or something.
Yeah.
For some reason, I couldn't get a hold of anybody. So I just figured, well, they'll be back in, whenever, half hour or hour. And Mom can probably tell her part of the story better.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it may be that I did text them and
right,
whatever. Anyway, when they finally got there, Josh kind of probed. He said, "Where's the pain?" And I showed him where it was, and he said, "Could be appendicitis. You better get into the hospital." So Mom drove around trying to find a hospital in Atlanta.
Yeah.
She didn't know where anything was. So anyway, we finally got there, and they spent hours checking it out because they didn't want to do an appendectomy if it wasn't really an appendix problem. So they finally determined it was, and they got in there and determined that it had burst. That's what I felt in the hotel when it had burst. Yeah. Anyway, but it went well and healed up pretty well. That's the only. And Mom, she can tell you about her health problems. Yeah.
And then I feel like I remember you've always kind of talked about your back.
Oh yeah, it's always been. yeah, iffy.
Do you know why it's like that, or it's just like that?
Well, I think mostly just from sitting for decades in a chair, most of the day. I think that'll do it, and you know, leaning forward, you know, looking into a computer. Yeah.
So you'd say overall you've had a pretty healthy
the back's
adulthood.
never been a major problem, just an annoyance forever,
And talk about religion in your adult life. So maybe we could start with your conversion story.
Okay, I was living in Sedalia, Missouri, by myself.
How did you get out? When did that... Was that a quick... Did you live there long? I feel like that didn't come up at all.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah. So the way that came about was I had moved down to Florida with a buddy of mine, with a couple of buddies of mine, to do construction work in Florida, and stayed there close to a year. And my buddy and I had each met a couple of girls, and he broke up with his girl, but me and my girlfriend Cheryl, Cheryl had a sister who lived in Las Vegas, so her sister said that we could stay with her in her apartment, so we went out there.
Just drove out there?
No, actually, Cheryl went out. Can't remember how she got out. I think she took a bus, a Greyhound out there, and I can't remember why I stayed behind, but the arrangement was I was going to come out later. Anyway, so I hitchhiked all the way from Florida to Las Vegas. Yeah.
Did you have any crazy things happen on the way?
Yeah. I got picked up by two guys who were heading out to California to do they were going to be security guys, you know, do security for somebody. And one of them or both of them had handguns with them, and they were kind of shifty guys. They were running out of money, and so they'd pick up people and say, "Hey, you know, we're running low on gas, and you know, we got any money? You got any money?" And so we'd pick up a guy, and they'd get some money from him. We'd go another 100 miles, and then picks up somebody else, and blah blah blah. Anyway, we finally totally ran out of gas. Well, let me put it this way. We got to the point where we were so low on gas that they had to do something. So they talked about, so there's these turquoise jewelry places. You know, there's probably only like an old Indian guy in there running the place. We could go in there and rob him, you know.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So anyway, at that point, you know, I said, I can get out at the next, you know, the next intersection, the highway such and such. So I got out in Kingman, Arizona. And anyway. Yeah, so I was in Las Vegas for close to a year, working in a casino printing shop, a little casino that you'd never heard of. Had its own printing shop where they had like 6 employees, where we'd print up coupon books and cut them and put them in little books so they could hand them out to their customers, you know, for free breakfast and all this stuff. And then from there, for some reason, I don't know why we decided to leave there, but Cheryl was from Sedalia, Missouri. Her parents lived there, and she wanted to move back home, so we did. That's how we got to Sedalia, Missouri, and then we were there about a year and broke up.
And so you were just still there, but you were broken up at this point?
Yeah, and the apartment we had been living in, she moved out, and so I stayed there by myself. And then one day, the missionaries knocked on my door. I was in a second floor apartment, looked down, saw them, thought they were Jehovah's Witnesses, was not interested, and just didn't answer the door. They were back within the week of knocking again, so I thought, something just made me feel uneasy about, I felt like kind of a chicken, not answering my door, what kind of a what kind of a worm are you just hiding in your apartment? So I answered the door, and they seemed nice, so I let them in, and they presented the Joseph Smith's vision story, and it sounded great, it sounded really interesting, and I didn't know for sure whether I believed it or not, but I felt good about it, so I just kept having them come over, and about 6 weeks later, my big hurdle is I had to quit using weed, smoking weed, which I really liked to do, because it really made music sound great, But anyway, I talked to them about it, and they said, well, just try and gradually do it less and less, and pretty soon you'll be, through with it. Anyway, so that went. So.
6 weeks from when you had the first discussion to when you got baptized?
Yeah, about 6 weeks.
It's pretty quick.
Yeah.
And anything more? Okay, so then you got baptized. Do you remember your baptismal date?
May 20th, I believe, 1975.
Okay, and then how long was it after you got baptized that you decided to serve a mission?
Well, so I was there in Sedalia for another year and a half, and in the church, and I was of course 25 by then, and I kind of felt that the church was teaching that I was probably of the age where I should get married, as opposed to serving a mission, because, well, for the obvious reasons. And so I was torn, and I had one time I had this home teaching companion who'd been in the church a long time, was a real solid guy. I asked him, I said, what do you think? Should I serve a mission or get married? And he said, well, I think if you serve a mission, you'll learn, develop qualities that your future wife will want to have, and you'll have a much better, marriage. So I think probably serving a mission would be a good thing to do. So I just went with that with his advice. And
do you remember when you left on your mission, around the date?
Yeah, I left November of 77.
Okay, so there was a couple years between when you got baptized.
Yeah, because I had
to. On your mission.
After I decided, I went. They had me talk to a member of the state presidency, and I told him about the stuff in my past, and he says, well, as long as you repented all that, that's fine, So anyway, and then at about that time, I moved back to Kalamazoo, and so I was in the Kalamazoo ward, and I needed to save up money, and
Did you pay for your mission?
I paid about half of it.
And then did the ward pay the other half, or your parents?
The ward paid the other half. Yeah, actually, Dad had married Elsie by then. You remember Elsie?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so it was kind of funny. He was doing some cherry pitter maintenance up in Traverse City all by himself. And he had a little camper up there that he lived in. So I wanted to ask him if he would, provide some support for my mission. So I traveled up there one weekend and asked him. He said he would, and then he talked about it with Elsie later, and
she didn't want to.
Thumbs down from her. So anyway, so yeah, it was just the ward and me, yeah.
And where did you serve your mission?
Served it in northern Germany, in the cities of Bremen, Hamburg, Wilhelmshaven, Wilhelmshaven, Bremerhaven, Berlin, and that's it. Yeah.
What was the name of your mission?
The Germany Hamburg mission.
And do you remember roughly how many people you baptized, or names of anyone that you baptized?
Yes. I think we baptized 9 people. The ones I remember most was a family, brother and sister Cowles, and they had 2 children. One, and we baptized 3 younger men, 4 younger men, and another family, and a single sister. Yeah.
Do you have a story from your mission that you recorded?
Well, I got to go out tracting one night with Carl Cook, who is now one of the 70, General Sorey.
Was he just visiting, or was he serving in the mission?
He was my, they have assistants to the president.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. He was one of the assistants to the president, and from time to time, they would go out and pick somebody to trade off with and just go out for the night with him. So he did that with me.
And do you remember, back then, were you wow, he's, different than, or was there anything about him that you were
He was always my favorite
of?
guy, that I kind of looked up to, wow, what a guy, and he was really friendly, and, we had a great time going. We had a kind of a notable experience. We taught this guy, really strange guy, and his wife. His wife was just kind of in the other room, but we taught him, and he, before we left, he served us some soup, and it was really good. And anyway, after I got back with this guy again, just to touch base and see how he was doing, he said, "Yeah, it was nice having you here." And I said, I thanked him for the soup, and he said, "Yeah, about that. After you left, this always kills me." He said, "Yeah, after you left, I went into my wife and I slapped her. I said, there's a word called Versalzen, meaning it's oversalted. He said, this is for salts, and I slapped her. I said, what did you do that for? It was great soup. Anyway. Yeah. I wrote about that night. In fact, we went back to that guy's apartment a couple days later, and he left this crazy note about on his door about he couldn't meet with us, but it was a note and like a hotel bill or something in English, and he wanted us to translate it for him because he had been at this hotel, and I don't know if he was drunk or something, or he had broken some things, and they had sent him a bill for it, and said, could you please translate this? And anyway, I wrote all of this up and about Elder Cook being with me on that first night, and you know how cool that was. And
Where'd you write that?
In my journal, yeah.
In your journal.
Yeah.
And what about your mission? Like, what about Germany are some things that you like really loved that's different than America?
Well, the people in Germany are kind of I'll use the word reserved. They don't really show their emotions that much, and but with people of that sort, generally, once you do get past their outer defenses and make a friendship with them, they really become, you know, some of our mission has a little website or Facebook page, I should say, where, you know, just like a few weeks ago, this missionary went back. He was there back in like 1980, and he was meeting with people that, you know, he taught and went to church with back then, and they were, you know, once you get in their inner circle of friendship, then they're really solid friends. So I liked that about it. Yeah, they're you know, their friendships aren't casual. That once you're their friend, yeah.
You're like family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what are in your adult life? What would you say are some hobbies or sports or talents that you have?
Hobby is playing the guitar. Sports. I never, in my adult life, got enough free time to play any sports.
Did you play sports when you were a kid? You didn't mention it if you
I played
did.
Little League baseball when I was like 14 or 15. 14, I think it was. And was not good at it at all.
Well, if you started at 14, most kids, at least these days, start way younger than that.
I was in senior Little League, yeah. Which, yeah. I think they said I was almost too old for that. Anyway. But yeah, I enjoyed it, but I didn't do well at it at all. Oh, I also in high school, I joined the wrestling team. And you can imagine how that went. I was a little string bean guy, you know. I was in the, like, they had a weight classification of, I think, they started at 95 pounds was the lowest. Mm-hmm. And then I was in like 110 pound range, you know. The deal was you always, when you join the wrestling team, you starve yourself so you can get down to the next lower classification. Then you have more advantage over the smaller guys, you know. So anyway, but I didn't do well. It was good exercise though. I enjoyed it. Yeah.
And then, what would you consider some of your talents? So you said guitar.
Yeah. I don't. I mean, I have a talent for technical stuff, but
Engineering. Do you feel like you have an engineering brain?
Yeah.
Problem solving.
I think so. Yeah. Right.
And it has a thing here for reading. I don't know if that's just, you know, do you have like a favorite book of all time, or like maybe a genre that you just really enjoy?
I read a lot. I generally read lots of books at the same time, partly because, you know, one book that I start, maybe I'm not that interested in. Well, yeah, it's partly that, and partly that I hear about this other book, and oh, that sounds interesting, so I start reading that one. So, you know, right now, for example, I'm reading probably 12 different books at the same time, maybe even more, I don't know. But yeah, all types. After I joined the church, I think I mostly read nonfiction, probably three-fourths nonfiction and 1/4 fiction from that point on. Yeah, but any kind, no particular.
Do you have a favorite author?
Yeah. Some of my favorites are William Faulkner, Thomas Wolfe, yeah, those are my, Dickens, Charles Dickens, yeah. Those are my probably 3 favorites, I'd say.
And what about social activities? Do you enjoy social activities, and if so, what type?
Social activities, well, I would say I like social activities that involve my close friends. I don't really like to go to parties where you hang out with people that you don't really know and that kind of a thing. So.
And what do you like to do with them when you hang out with your close friends?
Just go out to dinner, you know, or maybe to a movie, you know. I can't really, in the church, as a church member, you know, your social activities are kind of limited, if you know what I mean. So.
And what are some of your personal traits?
Personal traits? I've always been told that I'm quiet, you know. People, when I was a kid, people always say, "Boy, you're quiet," you know, and they jokingly say stuff like, you know, wow, let's think of something to get him to talk about or something, you know, always stressing the point that I don't talk much, so I'm a good listener, so that's a trait I have. I like to listen to people. Maybe that's why I don't talk very much, and a lot of the people that other people find annoying because they talk a lot, you know, I'm fine with. I just, you know, because generally the people who talk a lot, they tell some interesting stories, you know. So.
Would you consider yourself introverted or extroverted?
Introverted.
or in between? I think they do like an in
Well,
between too, but
put it this way, I'm introverted until I get to know you, and then I'm pretty normal from that point on. And serving a mission, of course, helped me get more extroverted, of course, and so I can speak comfortably to any stranger now with no problem, whereas probably before my mission, that was a lot more difficult.
and would you consider yourself, like judgmental or just kind of easygoing, accepting?
Easygoing, accepting,
And would you consider yourself more like emotional or intellectual?
Well, I don't know if it's genetic or what, but my mother has the same characteristic as. And it might be due to her upbringing, I guess, which she then transferred to me. But whenever we talk about family things that are meaningful to us, we get choked up. So, from that aspect, I would say I'm emotional, but generally, I'm more intellectual.
Right, I know what you mean. I know what you're saying, but in a way, it's more that because you're not normally emotional, when you do talk about feelings, it's like, it's uncharted territory.
Yeah, that could be it, right?
And then are there any travels? You already told me some of your travels during your adult years. Were there any other notable travels?
No, I can't think of any.
And what about your retirement? Do you want to talk about your retirement years? Maybe starting from the first time. Maybe
Yeah, so first retirement was when we moved here to North Carolina.
And how old were you?
Was that was 18, so I was 69.
Okay, so you retired at age 69.
Yeah, and that lasted just over a year, like a year and 2 months, and then I went to work in Florida for 10 months. Sort of retired again for 4 or 5 months, maybe 6.
During COVID, correct? Was that COVID? Okay.
Right. And then went to work remotely for Honeywell for about 10 months. And retired again for about 4 or 5 months. And then might not have been that long, but then I went remotely to work for the Collins people in Cedar Rapids for just about 3 months, and didn't like that, and so spent another couple months, 2-3 months, and not before I got to the current job I have now with GE Aviation in Grand Rapids, Michigan, working remotely.
And when are you hoping, if ever, to, retire for good?
We're hoping to get the house paid off, and I told you the other day, 10 months, that's a little too over-optimistic, I think. It's probably going to be more like 18 months. And then...
So at that point, you would be 75, is that right?
Yeah. Right. And I hope to retire for good then, and do a little traveling and enjoying ourselves.
So, do you have any goals left in your life other than paying off the house, retiring, traveling?
Yeah, we want to serve some sort of mission, and we're not sure what kind. We had always thought it would be a proselyting mission, but Cassie, the times we've been ward missionaries, Cassie doesn't do well with working under somebody else's supervision. She has her own ideas of the way she wants things to go, and she, if she's told to do otherwise, it becomes problematic, because I'm always trying to follow the leader's counsel, but she's wanting to do something different. So I don't think that type of a mission is going to work for us. But and actually, I'd probably prefer just what my ideal mission would be to go to Africa and help with food distribution. Drive trucks up and unload grain bags and stuff like that. That would be my ideal.
Humanitarian.
Yeah, humanitarian.
Yeah. Okay, this is kind of a loaded question, but is there any message you would want to share with your posterity?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. To my posterity, I would say that whatever doubts, questions, whatever searching for meaning in your life that you're undergoing, if you can only believe in Jesus Christ as the Savior of the world and the only Savior we have, then you will, if you hold fast to that, you will find yourself eventually on the right path.
Great advice.
In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.